What's the worst advice you got from someone you admire? Someone came to me and said, Dar, I don't think you're ever going to be able to recover from all these failures that you've had in life. And that's always going to follow you around. So I think you should change your name. And I said, I should change my name? I decided, because I was seriously considering it, that not only was I not going to change my name, that I was actually going to build my whole company off of my name. And a few years later, here we are with over 60 billion views. So I'm glad I didn't follow that person's advice. Have you ever felt like you were living according to someone else's values, and in which way? I spent the first half of my life feeling like I was living according to someone else's values. And I think similar to a lot of immigrants, I felt like I was torn between these two different cultures. I was born in America and I grew up in a city where I was the only Indian kid there outside of my brother. And so when I went to high school, I felt like I did not fit in. I would try to go from group to group, trying to fit in. And most of the time, I actually ended up having lunch inside of the bathroom because I was so embarrassed to be sitting by myself. So then I thought I have to actually follow this Indian path then, because that's where I'll find my people. But when I would find myself going to our Indian temple or Indian get-togethers, I felt myself being constantly judged and criticized for not being Indian enough. I'm too Indian to fit in with the Americans. I'm too American to fit in with the Indians. What path do I choose? And it wasn't until my late 20s that I finally realized I don't need to choose a path. I don't really need to fit in any box. And, I can freely accept myself for how I am. And if I change, that's okay too. So yeah, now I'm just a lot more comfortable in my own skin and I don't feel like I have to necessarily appease anyone. Ooh, this is a good one. Where has pain served a purpose in your life? Where do I start? So when I turned 30 years old, I was at the darkest place in my life. I was going through a really bad public breakup. I was completely broke. I was having family problems, health problems. I was dealing with depression. I was so anxious. I couldn't stay still. I needed to be walking all the time because I just needed to keep my body going because my mind wouldn't stay still. I would wake up in the middle of the night with cold sweats. And it was just the feeling of impending doom, like your life was over. Growing up in the culture I did, you're supposed to have life all figured out. I should have been a doctor, an engineer, a teacher, lawyer. To be on the verge of having to move back in with my parents, that was something that was going to be so shameful. Everyone said, see, that's what you get for not following this path or not prescribing to this mentality, the way that you're supposed to live your life. And I started thinking maybe they were right. It was a very embarrassing place, just the lowest place that I could ever be at. Throughout my life, I always blame the reason for my failure on something that had nothing to do with me, right? So if my business didn't succeed, I blamed the economy. If a partnership didn't go through, then I would blame my business partner for backstabbing me. But when I got to being 30 years old, I couldn't help but think that throughout my life, I've experienced so many failures. I am the common denominator. I am the reason for all of this failure happening. And if I don't see myself as the problem, I will never see myself as a solution. From that point forward, I said, no matter what happened to me in life, I would take personal responsibility for it because I am accountable for everything that happens to me. That was the most empowering feeling. And there are times where you're going to revert back to being that old person that you're trying to let go of, because that process takes time. It could take months, it could take years. So it was a trying time, but it was the best decision that I ever made because now I feel like I have control over every outcome because I'm no longer a victim. All right, let's see. In what area of your life do you trust yourself? That's an interesting question. I'm extreme. I actually have an Excel spreadsheet where I have every single one of my goals, and there's like 100 goals on there. And on a weekly basis, I evaluate my performance and I give myself a score of 1 through 10. And I think it also is something that changes over time. Like for me in high school, success would be finding someone to have lunch with. And then in my 20s, then success became all about financial success. Yeah, so to me, productivity is directly correlated with my happiness and my success. So that's why I obsess about it. Okay. What was a time when you were really down, when something didn't go your way, and you found something to be grateful about anyway? So there was one particular moment, and that happened during COVID. It was around Christmas 2020, and my whole family got hit hard. My eldest daughter, she's 2 years old, she had high fever, she was sweating, and then her eyes started rolling back in her head. And like my heart dropped. So I called 911. Right away, they were like, she has to go in right now. As soon as we get there, because it was COVID, I couldn't go into the hospital. You know, everything is just becoming like more and more elevated. The anxiety is just building more and more. My heart's pumping. I had no idea what was happening. So I am now thinking worst case scenario in my head. And the only thing that went through my mind in those moments were all those times that my daughter Ella wanted to play with me or wanted my attention. I would say, hey, sweetheart, like daddy's working right now. I'll play with you later. I never thought about the idea that later may not come. So I'm like, you know, a total wreck. I get a call. Thankfully, Ella's gonna be okay. And all I could think about in this darkest moment of time was this happened to be the biggest blessing, because going forward, my life will never be the same. So I've been able to use that experience to continuously remind me as to what my real values are in life. It's always, I need to write one more script. I need to do one more report. I need to get one more video done. But sometimes I have to, remind myself that, hey, you know what? It's okay if I miss that one thing. So my definition of success changed overnight. Every single morning, my kids, they know dad is taking them to school. 95% on time. And they can count on me to always be there to show up when I say I'm gonna show up. So success is a little bit more about showing up for the people that I love and trying to become better every single day. It's a lot different than where I was earlier in my life.